I don't know. It's a bit of an interesting question, the one that's made up the title of this episode, but I've never really had to question it up until just recently when I saw a clip online. And normally, this question is usually asked more on the sex front than on the dating front because most people usually do that whole comparison of men and women and whether they want to or can when it comes to sex and or marriage. People usually make those comparisons, but in this particular case, it's something that's definitely worth discussing. But before I can do that, where are my manners? I should have started with an intro by saying, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is Denver B. This is a much shortened, less edity, no instrumentally version of the podcast, which is, it's almost like a mini episode of some sort. But I usually like to do these episodes whenever I'm on break in between seasons, normally so that I can rest. I don't have to think too much about what I should record, and it's usually just one main topic. I usually just discuss it and I just give my thoughts on it. And I just keep it simple and I don't make the episode too long. So, for example, with this episode, because I'm not making it too long and it's just one topic, it is about men and the choice to be single. Now, for me to get into this, I first need to start off by talking about where all of this came from, which is actually a clip that I saw on IG, where a very mature lady, aka old, was busy explaining why it is that men just can't seem to fathom that women could choose to be single. Now, I listened to what she said, and as usual, whenever I listen to people like this, I tend to be very critical, and then I had a bunch of my thoughts on it. But before I can give my thoughts, let me just play the clip so that you can understand the context. So, without further ado,
men can't believe that women are single by choice because men aren't single by choice.
Dear Jesus, did you hear what she said?
So, did you hear what she said? I heard what she said. I listened, but I can't say that I agree with what it is that she's saying. Now, granted, she is much older than me, so probably she has a hell of a lot more wisdom than I do, but I don't know. Is it that men can't be single by choice, or is it just the fact that most women like to prioritize the idea of a relationship, and that's sort of how socially people have been engineered, and that's sort of something that's expected? I don't know. Let me just try and align some things, because I'm a guy, I really can't speak for the women, but when it comes to the question of whether men can be single by choice, I believe that we actually can. I don't think men are single because they don't have any other choice. Actually, I know of guys that choose to be single because they have too much choice, or they feel like they have so much choice. So to say that guys will usually not choose to be single, y'all are forgetting some of these super successful guys that are fairly popular that every babe wants to shag. For them, getting into a relationship, at least to some degree, might seem like a bad idea because you don't get to shag as much. And that's, considering that this guy has some moral code that prevents them from cheating. A lot of guys will get into relationships but will still act single because they have so many options. But anyways, I digress for a bit. Now, a lot of guys will choose to be single, but our definition of choosing to be single is very different from how women choose to be single. Now, of course, as the guy that has a lot of options, that will choose to be single because he has a lot of options. So, he wants to continue experimenting, or he wants to continue fucking around without having to be committed to one babe. That one, I think, is a little bit more akin to the idea of women choosing to be single. But now, there's a lot of guys that might not be seen to be choosing to be single because they don't have options, or they're not getting some, and it's not like they have a steady or pretty good supply of pussy. Now, of course, in such a case, it's not uncommon to hear someone saying that you're not choosing to be single, you're single because of circumstances. It's like, as Chris Rock would say, it's like boycotting Rihanna's panties. She never invited you. So technically, if a guy who isn't getting some is saying that they've chosen to be single, and yet it's not like they're pulling any babes, and it's not like they are attracting women day in, day out, then it seems like it's more of a circumstance rather than a choice. But the reality of it is, it could still be a choice even without the circumstance thrown in there. And the best example of this is actually when you look at guys who get into self-improvement. The whole idea of trying to improve yourself, whether it's physically, spiritually, mentally, psychologically, socially, some of the above or even all of the above, then you can very easily hear those guys saying that they've decided that they're going to stop trying to approach women, or they've dropped babes because they want to work on themselves. And there, it does seem like a choice. Now, is it still a choice even though there might be scarcity? Yes, I think it still is, because essentially most men's idea of being single by choice is actually just not chasing. Like, they're not trying to pull a babe, they're not trying to get certain babes to bang in there, they're not trying to get into any relationships at that time. Essentially, that is guys being single by choice. Women being single by choice is a little bit different, because theirs is more, how do I call it? It's more selection by answering the question rather than asking. For guys, it's more asking the question. For women, it's more answering the question, which is why it can seem like more of a choice for women than it is for men. Although I'll get to the women's part in a little bit, because I still need to break down the whole self-improvement thing for a lot of people. Because I can remember on the episode, What is Masculinity?, I was busy discussing how there was a woman who was saying that whenever men are busy trying to describe things in their lives, achievements and all that, they usually like to use women. And that was her idea of thinking that, masculinity is based off of owning or having some sort of power control over women, which I debunked to be wrong. But when I was doing that episode, one thing that I mentioned was the fact that men will use women as an indicator or even as a show of achievement whenever they cross certain lines. So, for example, if the guy wasn't as serious in terms of a lot of different aspects of his life and he decides that he's making a changeover, so he's no longer going to chase babes and continue trying to sleep with every babe that he finds that seems interested in him, they're just going to focus on the work and trying to stack the dough and shit like that, then it is a pretty good indicator when they decide to drop a bunch of those women. So they decide that they're no longer trying to sleep with every single babe that they find, and they're just going to focus on the work and possibly the money. Like, that is one way that you can look at it. There's also the way in which guys will be like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make myself better. So I'm going to go start going to the gym. I'm going to improve my social skills. I'm going to put in more effort into my work. And for this guy who is putting a lot of effort into the gym and into his social skills, when the women that he knows compliment him on how good he looks, then it's a pretty good indicator that he's making progress in the gym. If he's getting more female attention from random women, and probably he manages to talk to a couple of babes here and he gets a couple of numbers here and there, then it's a pretty good indicator that the guy is improving both physically and socially. So when you look at it from those angles, you can clearly see that guys will actually sort of regulate the women that they're going for, whether it's increasing, whether it's decreasing, or whether it's maintaining, usually based off of whatever goals they have. So with that, then now you can ask, can men choose to be single? And the answer is yes. You can clearly see it, because these are guys that decided to take that chance and they decided to make it their work to go out there and either not approach as many women or not approach women at all, or just approach women. The idea wasn't getting into a relationship for some guys, but they decided to go into it because they are trying to improve in some way, shape or form. So with that said, now I guess I can talk about the women. What women mean by, I'm being single by choice. Now, is it something that men can't understand or accept? Personally, I think that that's mostly bullshit. I think a lot of guys today know that there's a lot of women that can just choose to be single, because we know that women, they don't really crave a lot of that emotional connection that us guys find through dating and sex, because they can get that sort of feeling and connection from a lot of their very close, intimate friendships. Which is why, to some degree, you could argue that women can stay longer without sex, not just because of the choice factor, but also the fact that they get some level of emotional fulfillment without having to do the do. But anyways, that's a debate for a different time, all right? Now, when you look at the idea of women choosing to be single, I think that's the more, can I say, conventional approach to choosing to be single. The idea that you can choose to be with a bunch of different guys, you can choose to go out there and date, but you simply just decide, no, I'm not going to do that. Now, I feel like that one is something that I know a lot of women can do. I know a lot of women who've done it, and it's not something that's that uncommon for a lot of women to do. And to some degree, it kind of follows that belief system of, women shagging who they want and men shagging who they can. But on the other hand, men will marry who they want and women will marry who they can. Like, there's that sort of belief system that's there, and dating is sort of somewhere in between and I tend to think that's what confuses a lot of people, because people will be wondering, oh, why is like one gender single, and is it by choice versus the other? And it might confuse people on either end. Because when you kind of think about it, considering that men hold the keys to the relationship while women hold the keys to sex, you'd think that men would date who they want. They can choose who they want to date, and they have a selection. For them, dating isn't the problem. It's getting the sex that they'd want that is actually the issue there. So for guys, they can choose to be single or not to be single because they hold the keys to the relationship. Women, on the other hand, they don't hold the keys to the relationship. So for them to say that they've chosen to be single doesn't seem like it's exactly the case. But on the flip side, when you kind of think about it again, women will hold the keys to sex. And a lot of people today will want to have sex before they get into a relationship. Also, considering that there's a lot of people that tend to have casual sex, having someone that would make for a good partner in a relationship is something that's important. So finding a babe that will not only give it up to you, but will also be a good, dependable, great babe to be with is also pretty hard. Also makes it seem as though women, or at least the good ones, do tend to have quite the pick in terms of the guys that they can date or not. So they can choose whether they want to be single or not. And at that point, you'd realize that both sides are right and wrong in some way, shape, or form. Now, can guys choose to be single? Yes. Can women choose to be single? Yes. But in between that talk of being single, the idea of you just being single, not trying to hoe around and just, enjoying being single seems a lot harder for guys than it does for women. Because a lot of guys do tend to find validation, do tend to do quite a bit of measurement, and do tend to pay quite a lot of attention to women. Women, on the other hand, can selectively choose to not pay that much attention to guys. They can choose to focus on themselves, focus on building their friendships, yada, yada, yada. So, evidentially, women can probably adjust to the idea of just being single and not chasing anyone or any relationships a lot better than guys can. Guys can do it, but it'll probably take a lot more work, or maybe it'll end up just feeling a lot harder to do. Now, if you're listening to this, you're a guy or you're a woman, should you do it? Well, the reality of it is, yeah, I think every so often someone should choose to be single so that they can either realign themselves, say for example, if they got out of a bad situationship, relationship, or just entanglement. If they want to, realign themselves in their priorities and goals, being single is a good idea to do that. Also, if you're the type of person that hoes around, or if you're the type of person that fucks around a lot and you feel like your ability to pair bond has broken down so much, then yeah, you going cold turkey and staying single is a pretty good way to do it before you get into some sort of a commitment or relationship with someone where you just want to be with one partner. Evidently, at the end of the day, that choice on whether you should do it or you shouldn't is entirely up to you. And, you should be the one to decide that, maybe with help from a friend or two, if you really give that much of a damn. But all in all, I think it is something that many people should consider. The idea of hopping from one relationship to the next, or just going out into the streets and hoeing around every so often, is something that I think should be sanitized with you having a moment when you're single, you're not trying to chase anyone, you're not trying to shag anyone, so that you can sort of realign your priorities and see what it is that you want as a person, what it is that you like as an individual, and also what it is that you'd like to receive from other people. And to conclude all of this, much as I sort of deviated a little bit, as a man, your singleness will rarely ever be classified as a choice. Can it be? Yes, it can. Should it be? Yes, it should. But is it always going to be that way for a lot of guys? Not entirely. But should you take charge of it and make it your choice? Yeah, definitely. If women, some of whom are even unable to pull guys even just a shag, can choose to take charge of it and make it a choice, I think you as a guy, whether or not you can pull a couple of babes here and there, can definitely do the same thing. Although, at the same time, I could be wrong about all of this shit, and our singleness has never been a choice. But I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.